Welcome to our very important and timely dialogue. Please, you'll be able to see a message on your screen to say that this meeting's being recorded because it's a public meeting, so please click OK. And please be advised that we're also going to be live streaming to Facebook. Soon we're going to get started. Lwazi Somia, my colleague from SALO, is going to be chairing the meeting, and he's going to provide the opening remarks and kick off the meeting. Once I can see that everyone's starting to connect to the audio, then we will be able to begin. So I'm now going to hand over to Lwazi.
Thank you so much, Lily, for opening up this meeting. We meet in the 30 years of democracy of South Africa. We've just come out of an election period where various people contested the political space for South Africa to usher in a new area of the seventh administration. Obviously, during this election period, issues around migrants and migrancy itself were raised by various political actors in the hopes of enticing voters to vote for them and their migrant policy. However, what has been missing from the dialogue are the experiences of migrants in South Africa, particular to one of our closest neighbors, Zimbabwe. South Africa has a long history with the people of Zimbabwe, stemming from the ages, from the Iron Ages during the history of Mapungubwe, which was a great empire in the northeast of South Africa and south of Zimbabwe, along with other great empires that had relations with various chiefdoms and kingdoms throughout that period. Shift towards the colonial period, where issues around diamonds and gold were discovered in South Africa, where the migrant labor relationship began, and the exploitation of regional labor by at the time the colonial government and later the apartheid government included the exploitation of Zimbabwean labor within South Africa. Zimbabwe have always moved into South Africa, created families, their families and infrastructure, and had relations with the people of South Africa. As we realize, the colonial borders themselves are artificial, that go beyond the great humanity that we have within this region and how we as a people interact with one another. Now, in order to bring a face towards this discussion, I'd like to bring on the ambassador of Zimbabwe to discuss what has been his experiences concerning dealing with Zimbabwean migrants in South Africa, realizing that there have been many impacts on Zimbabwean migrants, from displacement due to natural disasters, as we have seen in the east coast of South Africa, in particular in the KZN and the Eastern Cape region, the collapse of the building in George, the collapse of the streets in Johannesburg, along with a number of building fires that impacted a number of people that reside in South Africa, and in some instances impacting Zimbabwean migrants. So, Ambassador, I'd like to bring you on for you to unpack your experiences and deliberate on how do we now imagine ourselves the relationship between the people of South Africa and the people of Zimbabwe. Over to you, Ambassador David Hazipiri.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to all those who are online. And I want first to thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm going to switch off my video shortly because the device I'm using may not be able to carry the load. But I hope that colleagues have had at least a glimpse of how I look. Thank you very much. I will proceed to remove the video. Well, the subject that we are talking about today is a subject that regrettably today it evokes a lot of negativity, a lot of controversy, when in fact, when you look into history, migration is as natural to human beings is our very livelihood. Migration is a natural phenomenon in human history, and there is nothing new about it today. What is new about migration today is the narrative, a narrative that has tended to be very negative. So coming specifically to the issue of Zimbabwean migrants into South Africa, and I'm very happy that Mr. Somia, you have actually provided us the historical context. And today, South Africans and Zimbabweans share a lot in common. There are blood relations, there are ethnic relations, there are so many relations that tie us today. But when you read in the newspapers and you read on social media, you tend to get a very negative description of Zimbabweans here in South Africa. And it's really, for us, at least at the embassy, it is something that really worries and concerns us, because you have a characterization of not just the Zimbabweans who are here in South Africa, but a general characterization of Zimbabweans and Zimbabwe in a very negative light. And yet, if anything, we have always enjoyed historically friendly relations, and we are neighbors. At government to government level, we have excellent relations, even at some person to person relations, but there is an element in South Africa, regrettably, which spews a lot of negativity. So one of the experiences that I have had here is the negative stereotyping and scapegoating of Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans are depicted as illegal, and yet we know that the Zimbabwean migrant or migrant community in South Africa is very diversified. You have a migrant cohort which is sitting in boardrooms. You have people who have so much skill and experience in the financial sector, in many other sectors, making huge contributions to the economy of this country. You have a middle sector, if you wish. These are your technical people, also skilled, you're quite gainfully employed, documented. And then you do have, and let's admit, you do have right at the bottom of that rank, you do have undocumented Zimbabweans in this country working, some on the farms, maybe in the mines, doing a lot of illegal things. But you also get very desperate and destitute Zimbabwe migrants in this country, and you find them on the street corners or on the streets selling brooms and all sorts of things. So it is a very diverse community of Zimbabweans as migrants in this country. And whenever we speak about Zimbabwean migrants in this country, we need to keep that in mind. Again, unfortunately, you have, particularly in the social media, but also being aired by some politicians, you have the impression that there are too many Zimbabweans here in South Africa, or that in fact, Zimbabweans are the only foreign migrants in South Africa. Sometimes when you listen to some of the statements that are made, that Zimbabweans are stealing jobs and employment opportunities from the locals. You hear a lot about the hospitality sector. It is often cited as an area dominated by foreigners, and sometimes they just say by Zimbabweans, as if they are the only foreigners who are here. So that is certainly of concern, because it presents Zimbabwean migrants as a force for negative things, is a factor of negativity rather than actually a factor of positivity, because I believe Zimbabweans here by and large are making some very positive contributions to the economy of this country. Admittedly, we do have some within the Zimbabwean community who are spoiling the name of the community as a whole. You do have those who commit crimes. You do have those who do not have the proper documentation. And if anyone has been following us as the embassy and consulate in our public engagements, in our public statements, we always encourage Zimbabweans who are here in South Africa to respect the laws of this country. That is the primary obligation that they have. So The issue of undocumented migrants, I can tell you that is an issue which we are very much concerned about. And one of the ways we've tried to address it ourselves is to bring our services closer to our people, particularly those who are outside of Gauteng or Western Cape province. So we, once in a while, we do have mobile consular exercises going to all the provinces of South Africa and inviting and encouraging Zimbabweans to come and register, get birth certificates for the children, get to apply for passports. In some instances, the response has been very encouraging. In other instances, the responses have not been very encouraging. So this is something that we experienced last year. You will recall the issue of the Zimbabwe exemption permits and all the talk about the permits no longer being renewed, and the government of Zimbabwe taking the position that those Zimbabwean exemption permit holders who would wish to return to Zimbabwe would be most welcome and would be facilitated. And we had what we called a mapping exercise. We sent teams throughout the provinces of this country. And I can tell you it was very disappointing in terms of the reception and in terms of the uptake of that offer. We got a lot more people coming to apply for documents and for other consular services, and less of the ZEP holders coming to be able to be registered. And I think this is for me, one of the disappointing things or disappointing experiences when I am dealing with my diasporans here. It is this this general reticence and reluctance to really come and be in contact with us. But when they run into problems, they then ask, where is the embassy? And where is the consulate? And yet when the embassy and the consulate reach out to these Zimbabweans, they do not reciprocate. So it's a very difficult situation, but we keep on reaching out to our nationals, inviting them to come and register and be known, so that when there are problems, we are better able to respond. One of the challenges we have with issue of undocumented migrants is it takes us much longer to be able to then give the services we need to give to, say, a Zimbabwean who is undocumented, because we then have to verify first that indeed this is a Zimbabwean. And this is the case that we experienced in George. In George, the numbers of victims were varying. And for Zimbabwe, at some point we were told there were 5 nationals, and then the number went all the way up to 8 nationals. And even among those who passed on, we also then had to verify that indeed these were Zimbabweans, because some of them were not documented. We had a similar situation with the fire that took place in Johannesburg in that building. The consulate went out there to provide service. And you will be surprised that, in fact, our nationals, Zimbabwean nationals, fled away from the consulate staff. Why? Because they were undocumented. It was only later when in fact, their situation got so desperate, they were the ones who then reached out to the consulate. We had already gone out to offer the service. So this is one of the things that we are always doing. Whenever there is a situation that we have had that would have occurred, be it a vehicle accident, or be it a disaster like this Johannesburg building, or the George building, we send out a team always from the consulate to go and determine, are there any Zimbabweans involved? What type of help do they need? I want to stress one point, and that is, regrettably and unfortunately, neither the embassy nor the consulates have a contingency fund from which we can immediately draw to be able to respond to these situations. In every situation, we have to determine the need, the level of need, and then we have to request for those resources from the authorities in Zimbabwe. And I can say in 100% of the cases where we have requested that support, we have been able to receive it. And that support has gone to particularly where you have road accidents or particularly road accidents, we've been able to support in the repatriation of the remains of those who have passed on. In the case of the Johannesburg building, we're able to provide temporary shelter and food assistance, but quite understandably, we are not able to offer long-term support by way of the shelter or food. We encourage our nationals who are not able to sustain themselves in this country to go back home, and will be more than willing to assist them. Coming back to the issue of documentation, I am happy to announce that, in fact, we have now put in place e-processing facilities and e-passport processing center at our consulate in Johannesburg and also in Cape Town. And the one in Johannesburg is going to be up and running shortly. I don't know whether my Consul General is online. If he is, he may be able to give you some details. We just needed to put in the necessary equipment and other networks. Those are now in place. I'm just waiting for a team from Zimbabwe to come and train the staff so that they can start offering this service. I think this is going to assist a lot of Zimbabweans in easing their ability to obtain these documents. The Cape Town facility might take a bit longer, but definitely by end of June, I can assure you the Johannesburg Center will be up and running, and we will be issuing the necessary public statements on that. I want to conclude by saying we do not just seek to interact with our own nationals, but we also interact with the South African government on issues to do with migration, issues to do with undocumented Zimbabweans. One of the things that we have agreed on and we are still to do is we really need to sit down and look at how best we can mitigate the negative aspects of migration into South Africa by Zimbabweans, and perhaps, in fact, heighten and improve on the positive benefits of migration for both countries. Our nationals, and this is one thing which concerns us a lot, our nationals here are vulnerable to exploitation. And we are very much concerned by that. And one of the reasons is because they are undocumented. And one issue we will be discussing with our colleagues in South Africa is on the labor migration policy here in South Africa. How can we work out win-win arrangements? Because now we see that there is a proposal to have quotas of foreigners who can be employed in certain sectors in this country. Perhaps this is a starting point where we could then look at bilateral labor agreements between our two countries, and that way we can then facilitate formal and regular and orderly and safe migration of Zimbabweans into South Africa. Let me conclude by saying we are watching also with a lot of interest the developments on the political front in terms of migration. We have already seen in this election a lot of statements that have been made to do with migration. We are getting a sense of a hardening of positions towards migrants. We are also seeing the white paper that has been presented by the government, and perhaps it will be discussed in the next parliament. Again, on our part, what we would want to do is to work together with the government of South Africa so that we can encourage, as I said, regular orderly migration, because it is to the benefit of, particularly first and foremost, the migrant himself or herself, and also to both our two countries. I think I will stop there. Perhaps, if there are any questions, I will be quite happy to respond to those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for unpacking the current situation on migrancy, especially Zimbabwean migrants within South Africa, and for announcing the digital passport facilities to be opened up at the two consulate, and also reminding us that there can be win-win sets in terms of the situation of migration. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement makes a specific reference to the necessity of migration of people as long as it's regularized and also in coordinated in order to achieve best win sets, not only for the economies of both countries, but also for the relationships of the people within those countries. But we would like to move on, and thank you so much, Ambassador, and we'll come back to you should there be questions before you leave. I would like to move on to Nyeleti Baloyi from the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa to give your analysis concerning this current situation of Zimbabwean migrants in South Africa, the impact of legislation, the proposed legislation could have on migrancy, along with the challenges concerning the notion of being documented, in particular related to ZLPs and other forms of visa documentation, and what have been the challenges have various people, various Zimbabweans experience within the system, both within South Africa and also within Zimbabwe, to allow them to freely move between the two countries. Over to you, Nyeleti.
Thank you very much, Lwazi. My name is Nyeleti Baloyi, as previously mentioned, and I am from the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. Our main aim in our organization is to advocate for the protection and promotion of human rights of asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants in South Africa. Coming to your questions, Lwazi, we have been quite concerned with the recent suggested policies by the Department of Home Affairs, as well as the political climate in South Africa generally when it comes to migration issues. The Department of Home Affairs released a white paper titled White Paper on Citizenship, Immigration and Refugee Protection towards a complete overhaul of the migration system in South Africa in November 2023. And there was a call for the public to make submissions in regards to this proposed policy. And the time frame that was given to people to actually make submissions was relatively short. It was quite short because it was released in November. We all know South Africa shuts down in December, and the submission deadline was in January, although it was extended for a few weeks to the end of January. It was not a sufficient amount of time for people to actually participate meaningfully in this proposed policy, especially those who will be affected by this policy. We found that that was incredibly unfair, and it was just a symbol of what the Department of Home Affairs continues to do, failing public participation when it comes to policies and decisions that they make regarding this particular beneficiaries, which are migrants. In the white paper, what I found ironic is that it actually endeavored to break the chains of colonialism in the migration system and move to a more Pan-African approach. I say this is ironic because if you take a look at what Pan-Africanism is, it recognizes the common challenges faced by African nations, such as poverty, conflict, and resource scarcity. And migration should not be seen as a potential, rather it should be seen as a potential tool for regional cooperation and not seen as an adversary to that, as the proposed laws suggest. The proposed laws in the white paper suggest very restrictive laws, which would hamper the collective approach that the ambassador was speaking on, which are progressive and are important for our regional development. It creates isolation in states and hinders collaborative solutions. as mentioned before, the presence of migrants is very important. And it's not only important in the space of South Africa, but throughout the world, the presence of migration helps the development of nations. Some of the biggest nations in the world are the way they are because of the presence of migrants. So this approach is really, really disappointing. And the white paper also proposes something very drastic. It proposes the review and withdrawal from international instruments, such as the 1951 Convention, as well as its 1967 Protocol. Such proposals, which have been made final, as the white paper was made final in April, which was quite a shock. I mean, if you take a look at the track record of the Department of Home Affairs, things never move that quickly. Even in court, when they're asked to actually respond to things, they take their sweet time, but they were able to finalize this white paper in a space of a few months, despite the fact that they received so many submissions, which begs to the question as to whether they actually considered any of our submissions. But back to the proposed review and or withdrawal from international instruments. This particular move could earn South Africa a reputation of unreliability. Not only is this proposal very regressive to the promotion of human rights, it can make South Africa a pariah in that other states would be less willing to cooperate or work with us because such a move makes us look very unreliable. But even if South Africa was okay with being an international pariah, the suggested reservations stand in stark contrast with the values that are enshrined in our constitution, because some of the suggested reservations that the Department of Home Affairs wants to make will incredibly limit fundamental human rights, such as the right to work, the right to education, the right to healthcare, the right to freedom of movement. And also what we were particularly concerned with was the suggested restrictive limitations to the route to citizenship, which not only places prejudice on migrant children, possibly, but also South African children, because due to the inefficiencies of the Department of Home Affairs, there are a lot of children who would normally be South African nationals that find themselves being stateless. And these proposed restrictive routes on how to acquire citizenship, which would be a breakaway to the current system, could possibly lead to statelessness. And in the final white paper, the Department of Home Affairs insists that we are wrong in our submissions, even though they do not actually provide any substantive research that substantiates why we are wrong and they are right. So that is quite concerning, and particularly to children of Zimbabwean nationals who were born in South Africa and have lived their entire lives in South Africa, and in some instances would find themselves being stateless because they do not know any other nation besides South Africa. That is very worrying. Now, I'd like to speak on the ZEP issue, which is also included in the white paper. It was quite disappointing to actually read in the white paper how the Department of Home Affairs dealt with the ZEP issue. They make reference to a UJ study, which they purport that a lot of ZEP holders are enthusiastic and are excited or are willing to actually move to the alternative permits. And as the ambassador mentioned earlier, that's not the actual case. Nor was it the case in the UJ study. Actually, if you read it, that is not what it reports. It actually reflects that a lot of people are uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety in ZEP holders as to what it is that they should do. Even on the ground, when we have public dialogues and engagements with, actually recently we had a cohort of Zimbabwean nationals, particularly coming from the Kingdom of Umzilikazi, where we had a dialogue with them and asked had a workshop of a sort to tell them how to access services, how to actually get themselves documented. And one of the biggest concerns in that engagement was a lot of people who were ZEP holders didn't know what to do. There's a lot of, everybody is in limbo because they don't know if should they stay on the ZEP permits or should they then apply for alternative permits. The problem here is that abandoning the ZEPs and applying for those waivers that the Department of Home Affairs was offering doesn't actually guarantee that people will be afforded those alternative permits. The main reason that the ZEP permits actually exist is because a lot of people fell in the cracks and don't actually qualify for the existing permits. So currently we are waiting for the constitutional hearing. The minister has applied to appeal the decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal, which declared that the decision by the High Court was right, and that the Department of Home Affairs decision to cancel the renewal of the ZEPs was invalid, as there were no public consultations, and that the minister should do the appropriate thing and actually consult people before actually reaching or deciding to cancel these permits. So we are waiting for the Constitutional Court hearing, but we are optimistic. COMSA is amicus curiae in that case, which is being led by the Helen Suzman Foundation. But we are optimistic that the court will find in our favor, as the Constitution is quite clear when it comes to these processes. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyeleti, for your contributions in this dialogue and reminding us about the various intricacies and some problematic aspects about the incoming legislation concerning migration reform. Thank you so much. And when the audience comes to ask the questions, we'll come back to you. I would like to move on to the Zimbabwean migrant community with Ngwabuto Mabena to explain and unpack the current situation around migrants in South Africa. Over to you, Ngwabuto. You may proceed.
Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. Greetings to His Excellency the Ambassador, and greetings to Ms. Baloyi. As the last speaker, mine probably is just to summarize, starting by saying that we are in the middle of an election. You will know that the changes in the immigration and citizenship laws were necessitated by the local government elections in 2021, where the ANC had lost the key metros. In 2015, a green paper was published where government was reviewing the 1999 white paper on international migration. And the argument at the time from 2015 was that the 1999 white paper was not pan-African. It made it easier for those coming from outside Africa to reside in South Africa, but making it difficult for Africans, particularly within the SADC region. So the white paper, which was then gazetted in 2017, recognized that migration indeed is a global phenomenon, and that our economies within the SADC region in the main are interlinked, and that they are more informal. Our economies are more informal. And therefore, people are crossing borders either as cross-border traders or people of low skill moving around as farm workers, domestic workers, and so forth, running small businesses. So the white paper, as gazetted in 2017, resolved to come up with a better way of managing migration. It proposed, which we have discussed in this platform, proposed the 3 visas that was going to cater for people of low skill, whether they work in a filling station, in farms, and so on, that they will have what was called a Satakweki visa. Those running small businesses, hair salons, and so forth would have a business visa, SATAC business visa, and then, of course, a cross-border visa. But 2021 happened. ANC losing key metros. We saw then in the ANC on the question of migration going to the right, if you like. But what this election so far is teaching us is that the anticipation that the 2024 elections was going to be more, or the question of migration was going to be an electoral question. It is not so, because the anti-migrant parties are not really making it big. If you read the manifest, other than the ANC, which has come up with a white paper, which my colleague Ms. Palo has just spoken to, other than the ANC, if you read the manifesto of the EFF, the manifesto of MK Party, even the manifesto of the Democratic Alliance, which even goes further to say grant permanent residence to ZEP holders. So it tells you that the 3 major parties that are in this current election are behind the ANC. Their issue is not more on the question of migration. There are other issues, of course, that informed this election. So this is why, as the Zimbabwe community in South Africa, we still call for the revisit of the white paper as gazetted in 2017, because we think it manages better migration. We do not think that you can deport every undocumented person in South Africa. What is key is to accept reality that you have people of low skill from the SADC region in the main that work, run business in South Africa, and how do you document such individuals? We think that in 2017 white paper on migration makes comes up with a better proposal. When Minister Mtswaledi published the white paper on migration, we did make a submission. Our submission was based on the reality that the middle class in South Africa, both black and white, in the main, they employ domestic workers from Zimbabwe and from other countries. These domestic workers are not documented, they are exploited, they are given what is called a stay in, they stay at work, they are working long hours. They are told not to go out because they run the risk of being arrested. So our proposal, which we submitted, was that you need to document and these domestic workers who are not documented, grant them special visas, because it is a reality that it is an industry that many migrants are employed in. What we are then realizing with the decision which Cabinet announced that it was to discontinue with the Zimbabwe exemption permit, and the minister saying people must apply for waivers, there are serious delays in the issuing of visas. The minister will say he's signing visas almost on a daily basis, but the reality of the matter is that you have people that applied for waivers in 2022. It's now 2024. They are still waiting for the outcome. People applying early 2023, they are still waiting for the outcome. People are unable to renew their driver's licenses. People are being threatened by financial institutions because they cannot produce a waiver, or at least show that they've applied to move to other visa, which the minister has proposed. The interpretation by some banks is that the ZEP, the extension granted by the minister, expires end of June 2024, and that the banks have been sending letters or messages to their clients to say you need to prove that you have applied, you have actually a permit in your passport, so that we do not close down the account. So all this are the issues that now affect the holders of ZEP because of serious delays that are in the Department of Home Affairs. When the minister said people should apply for a waiver, we understood that a person would have understood that these are the requirements for a general work visa because they do not meet those requirements. By submitting a waiver, we are basically asking the Minister of Home Affairs to waiver such a requirement so that you apply for a general work visa. Now we have people that have been issued with waivers who are applying for a general work visa. Then the rejection comes. People have been rejected on the basis that they did not submit a equivalent, what is called the South African Qualification Authority. They say we didn't see your certificate. But the waiver, as we understood it, was to waiver that requirement that if you work as a domestic worker, if you work in a construction, there is no need for you to supply or to submit a certificate from the South African Qualifications Authority because it has been waived. Hence, one has now to apply for a general work visa. Then we are seeing a lot of people being rejected on those bases. So we have a serious crisis with the holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits who are waiting for waivers which are not coming out, and we have serious issues with the rejections that we are seeing. And overall, we have serious issues with those that are outside the ZEP bracket, because we had thought that the white paper as gazetted in 2017 was going to take care of those that are already in South Africa that are working in the different sectors of the economy. Since Comrade was Insomnia, I said I'm summarizing. I think this would be a summary. Thanks so much.
A political summary indeed, my leader. Thank you so much for your contribution and helping us unpack the very, very nitty-gritty, nuanced and lived experiences of Zimbabwean migrants, and particularly the lived impacts on various migration reform policies being pushed forward by the 6th administration. Not knowing what the 7th administration might uptake going forward, it'll be really interesting to see how does the new parliament and the new administration that is emerging following the 29th of May elections in South Africa now takes up on this issue, and how do they now deliberate on how they not only make the African Continental free trade agreement a reality, but how do they also facilitate and resolve the concerns raised by certain citizen constituents throughout this entire election period. I would now like to, before I move on to my next speaker, I would like the audience and everyone in the room participating to stop preparing questions and also comments concerning the current situation, and even if you want to give a little bit of input, please prepare your questions. We'll be taking questions after Margaret Monyani from the Institute of Security Studies. So I would like everyone to be prepared for that section. Next, our panelist who will be our final speaker for today is Margaret Monyani from the Institute of Security Studies. We obviously understand the situation of migrants within South Africa, the history between the South African people and Zimbabweans. But we would like for you to unpack the impacts of these various migration reform policies that are at hand through the 6th administration, and the potential consequences and potential issues that might come up. Over to you, Margaret.
Good morning. Is that Loazi? Yes, Loazi. Sorry, I came in a little bit late, and I also want to, yes, I'm Margaret Monyani. I'm a senior migration researcher from the Institute for Security Studies. And I also just want to clarify that I won't be making a presentation. Rather, I'll be a discussant or a respondent, because we received your email quite late. So I couldn't prepare a presentation, but I offered to offer some inputs as a respondent. So yeah, this is quite very timely, and one of those debates that have been around for a while, and I don't know how long we will go with the migration issue in South Africa. But I will just start off by saying, maybe to comment on what the ambassador said this morning. He raises very pertinent issues, and I like his honesty to say, yeah, our people are facing this, but there is also he's honest about there's few characters here and there who also do 1, 2, 3 things that, of course, spoil the name of the Zimbabweans, migrants in South Africa. And I think I've met you in another meeting, and I was so excited about you raising the issue of you having those mobile consular services. And I have a few Zimbabweans, migrants around myself, and I went telling them, please, guys, can you please go get the passports? I had your ambassador say this and this. They started laughing hysterically. And I was like, why are you laughing? They say it could, you know, these people, this statement people say on social media, it could never be me. So this is what I came to understand, that there is one narrative you speak about, and that is in the know, that there is the negative narrative against Zimbabweans from the host communities, who portray them as thieves, murderers, all that. But there is also a narrative that the Zimbabweans have towards their own government. And so I came to understand that there is I don't know if it is a rumor I would call it, but they have this understanding that the embassy is working with the South African government. So that's why they don't come to get their passports and these other services you are trying to provide. So I don't know if the embassy knows this, and what exactly are they trying to do? Because if people are not coming out, what do you do? Do you just now report, okay, we are having a challenge, we went to this location and nobody came? So what is because they need this service, especially the undocumented ones. And you have mentioned a case of some death that occurred somewhere, and it is very difficult to offer some essential services, because then the process becomes very lengthy because of the verification. That not alone, even when you talk about the labor policies, you realize even transfer of social security benefits has I've been in one of those meetings where they say it's difficult for migrants when they lose their loved ones who was the sole breadwinner, and then there's benefits, it becomes very difficult. So maybe the ambassador could elaborate what are they doing to that effect. And you say, yes, you work with the government. And I've not lived in South Africa long enough, maybe 6 or 7 years, but I know the Zimbabwean migrants issue has been around for quite a while. You say you work with the South African government to ensure, I mean, inclusive narrative, to work around narratives and better policies. But is there the Zimbabweans know, do we know some of these initiatives, or what are you working on? Are they even aware? Because probably they don't see it. Do you go out? Do you hold meetings? I'm not sure. So are the people aware that these services are being offered, or those are closed door engagements that you have between government and government? Yeah, so those are some of that is what I would and I would say, what are the embassy now, what the embassy specific reforms that the embassy has been advocating for to improve the treatment and rights of Zimbabwean migrants in South Africa? And are your people in the know? Because then this will now maybe deal with the apathy, because they feel, no, you guys are working with the South African government. So if they come for their passports, they will be, of course, arrested or something like that. And then the two other speakers, you spoke my thoughts exactly on the white paper. It is one of those, of course, for lack of a better word, just a bizarre document. If you read it and you see how governments, first of all, I want to make this observation. The issue of negative narratives, we also have to understand it is occurring at a global scale. So it seems to be trickling down and taking root on the African continent. Because if we go back, like the ambassador made his opening remarks, migration has been part and parcel of of us as Africans. It makes us who we are. Everyone in this room can tell our ancestors, I don't know, came from where. I'm told that my ancestors came from the Congo forest. I don't know, from West Africa. There is that story that we are taught in history. But then there is this new narrative, and it's really being, if you look at the policy, the white paper, if you ask me, it's taking the narrative to another level. It's institutionalizing it. It's actually now stamping it with a policy. That is where we are getting to now. But we need to also understand how this plays in the global level, because now when we are talking about the Africans who moved to the north, they are slapped with the same narrative, but then it's now internally, it's not just South Africa. I could name 3, 4, 5 countries on the continent that are really, they are really having these negative narratives against certain. I'll give Kenya, for example, has a very tight negative narrative against Somali refugees in particular in Kenya. Why? They come from Somalia. It's inhabited by Al-Shabaab. So they provide terrorist links to, and that's why Kenya was able to suffer, I think, about 100 terror attacks between 2010 and 2015. So that was it. And the government started making some this bizarre, adopting some policies and directives. And it was, and this is the same thing that is happening in South Africa. So the question we need to ask ourselves as scholars and maybe help the government, the scholars, policy makers, is how is the government inventing the social reality? Because you see, what I see here, it's the government having the government invents its own social reality and then provides some very poorly considered proposals to solve non-existent problems. Because from what the two speakers have just mentioned on the white paper is, you look at it, is not a migration issue. It's the issue with the bureaucracy. You know, it's an administrative issue. Actually, they have a problem with administration. There's some lagging problems and all this, but then they want to make it an immigration issue. So there is a problem around how the government is imagining social reality. And maybe what we need to come in and ask questions is that maybe are we giving out, because then this speaks to, which the lady mentioned, is that lack of evidence. If there's no evidence, you can't provide a solution that is not based on evidence. Even the numbers at the Institute for Security Studies, we had a report produced last year in 2022. Sorry if I'm forgetting. It was titled "Busting Myths About Migrants in South Africa." And I remember Operation Dudula attended, and it was one of those hot meetings. I was there, and it was very unsettling. One of the myths, they were saying how many numbers are of migrants are there in South Africa. And from Statistics South Africa, it was around then 2-point-something or 3 million thereabout. And they were saying, no, it's around 12 million. And then you ask yourself, when this Statistics South Africa says there is 60% unemployment in South Africa, everyone agrees with them until they say, now we have 3 to 5 million immigrants in South Africa. They say, no, we don't believe you. So we cherry pick our truth, and we choose how to construct our social reality. And the government is playing into that, then creating this social reality that is non-existent, then creates problems where there are no problems, misplaced problems, and then the vague solutions to that. I like the guy who says, I've always, even when I was teaching at the university, I say, if I were the government, of which I'm not and I'll never be, is that no government should stay comfortable when we have undocumented people. The first thing you do, and I think the West is very good at this, you give them an ID. You can't leave someone to just be around without an ID. The first thing you do before you deport them, or you think, what will I do? ID them. Because someone without an ID can do anything, just about anything. But what we see right now is that even those people who legally came in are now having their renewals lagging at Home Affairs, and then they fall into the undocumented, irregular, if I might call it, category. And the numbers are going on, and it looked like now this is the new solution. Let's put them in that limbo, and then they will choose to go. And then if we go by what the ambassador has observed, they would rather be unregulated than go back home. You see, now this is what we say. We need to understand, why do people move? Why? Why do they choose, like, say, to come to South Africa? And why do they even choose not to have the papers? You know, there is some reality here we want to take lightly, but it understanding these dynamics, because humans are very difficult to understand and their behaviors. And that's why we need proper research, and the government needs to be informed by research. But like we know, politics, someone mentioned, the elections were coming, were around the corner. And there were three things. You have to, any party that shows that it's very serious about one, migration, two, load shedding, and I think corruption. The more serious you are, the more you are the man of the day, you know, that kind of a thing. So I don't know. Yeah, I know what we need to be asking is that although we never had enough time, I agree with the lady, and I'm not sure the recommendations that were sent in that they will be considered, all of them, or at the end of the day, politics will win, because then we raise these issues. But what if I might just throw this question? I know the guy mentioned a bit of this, but now to the lady, I would ask, what specific recommendation would you make to improve the white paper, if there is any that you think of? Then you think by this recommendation, then the government may address the actual, not imagined, challenges faced by the migrants. Yeah, so those, I think that just 2 or 3 questions I've raised for now. Let them respond, then I can come in if need be, but I'll give a chance to other people to ask questions, then I can come in later.
Thank you so much, Margaret, as a respondent, and asking those very critical questions. But I would also like to open this wider to the broader audience that would like to participate today. So all you have to do is simply raise your hand, and my colleagues, Lily and Shoki, will note your hands and assist me in noting your hands. And I'd like to thank the speakers for unpacking the various aspects around South Africa's migration reform and the impact it has had on our migrants and the potential impact it might have had. In particular, when we look at the white paper, similar to how Margaret and the other panelists have analyzed it, that it seems to be trying to resolve administrative hurdles within the Department of Home Affairs, and rather than resolving it through creating a more efficient systems, what it does, it simply legislates upon a situation where the Department of Home Affairs has additional powers that exclude migrants rather than resolving the fundamental key problems. And we have seen historically with previous legislations or acts by government or policies of government that have been exclusionary, it has also come at a huge expense at the taxpayers. So we remember the 2007 deportation and 708 deportations within South Africa that cost the South African taxpayer at the time over 350 million rand, in order to have people consistently being moving back and forth. So straight deportation itself has proven historically to be an inefficient system that our various policymakers have undertaken. And Margaret raises a very important point, that the issue of documented those who are undocumented being a very critical point. And we have seen this with this ZDP non-renewal by the state, where it simply placed migrants who were documented simply on the undocumented path. So it is all these various issues that are now crescenting into various pieces of legislation and various policy papers that we have seen, from the white paper concerning citizenship and migration to even the new bill presented by the Minister of Home Affairs, including the various policy initiatives such as the special permits and dispensation. And also, we must also be conscious, this is just not Zimbabweans alone. It also impacts the Basotho special dispensation, and how Basotho migrants are treated within South Africa, and in terms of their own our status within the country. And also, how do we now, what we also need to think about, how do we now not dehumanize those over a piece of paper, people over a piece of paper, rather have a more humane approach towards the situation of migration. So I'm here to take hands. So those who are prepared to ask questions. But Margaret has already asked very critical questions of the panelists. But I'd like to move on back to Ambassador David Hazipiri concerning some of the questions and some of the inputs made by the previous panelists. And I'm wondering whether you have additional inputs to make, Ambassador, because I understand that you're under tight time pressure. Ambassador?
Yes, please. No, thank you. Thank you very much. I've tried to listen as attentively as I could to this very interesting discussion, which of course is on a very sensitive matter. So one of the first things that I would like to say, and in response to, I think, some of the issues raised by Margaret Monyani, is first and foremost, as a government, we will seek cooperation and not confrontation with the government of South Africa, because that is the only way we will be able to find ways of solving some of the issues that do impact both our countries. Because this migration pressure that you feel in South Africa is one which also we feel as Zimbabwe, particularly when you have people traveling to South Africa through irregular points of exit or entry. There are issues of security. There are issues of documentation. So, and one of the other things that I need to underline is we have to respect the sovereignty of South Africa, excuse me, in taking decisions that are within its national interest. And we know the issue of immigration or migration is a critical and key expression of sovereignty by any government. So those are some of the sort of parameters within which we will have to seek solutions. And if in the case of the Zimbabwe exemption permits, for instance, I would be very open here and to say that there wasn't any prior discussion between our government and the government of South Africa leading to the announcement of the decision to terminate the Zimbabwe exemption permit. But let me say previously, at least the government of South Africa would have informed us of the decision that they would be taking prior to its public announcement. But with the ZEP, this is something that we also got to learn about, almost like with everyone else. And we have tried, and we have engaged the South African government certainly on this, made intercessions in terms of enabling people to be able to apply for exemptions and so forth. So there are limits to what we can do. I think one of the issues that you mentioned is this issue of trust. And it is, yes, and I must admit, it is an issue where we have to continue working on in order to gain the trust of our nationals. But we have assured them whenever we have gone out or whenever we have issued notices about our consular outreach to say the South African government authorities are not going to arrest anyone when we are on that program. I will just, if you have time, I'll just give you an example. We had a team that went to Northwest Province, and in one of the locations, the police and Home Affairs came and they started inquiring, who are these people that you are attending to? Do they have documents? And we told them that, in fact, it is precisely because these people don't have documents and we would like them to have documents that we are offering this service. So if anything, it's of interest both to yourselves and ourselves that these individuals get those documents, and they left. And normally when we do have these outreach programs, we engage the JERCO, we engage the local authorities, the police, the Home Affairs, everybody, so that they are aware. And generally we have received a lot of support, but and a lot of cooperation. But the issue of trust is really an issue that I am, as the embassy, we are really working on. And I can tell you we've been having a lot of engagements with our nationals in very small groups as a way of trying to build that trust. And that's the only way we are able to assure them that, if anything, we are here to protect them, including those who are incarcerated. We do go out to meet them and hear their complaints, and we bring those complaints to the attention of the government of South Africa. Whether the issues are resolved or not, it's another matter. But the fact of the matter is we do reach out and we do listen to our nationals, and we try to convey their views to the government of South Africa. I think I will leave it at that. We certainly, we have a lot more room to work together with the South African government. As I said, one of the areas we've proposed is let's discuss about a labor migration agreement so that we can safeguard the interests of the workers, but also ensure that South Africa benefits from that migratory movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Hamati Ripi, for your contributions in these discussions. And please keep us informed concerning those discussions, because this has been an issue that has been raised by the labor movement, especially concerning the exploitation of workers, especially undocumented migrants. And I'm sure some of your citizenry are being exploited due to the notion that they have not received their documents. So thank you so much. I understand that you have another meeting to attend to, Ambassador, and we're releasing you, Your Excellency, from the meeting. But I'd like to encourage the other people to come on board and engage in this discussion. But whilst the people are still preparing the questions, I'd like to move on to Nyeleti concerning these pieces of legislation, in particular concerning the white paper along with the bill. We understand that it was in the 6th administration that these pieces of legislation were brought through Parliament. Could you please inform us on what are the potential entry points that citizens can enter in order, if they have concerns about this piece of legislation, how do they now get this information, and how do we now facilitate a process where more active citizenry, especially South Africans, can speak to this legislation and raise their concerns, and also some of the 5 more critical points that you would like to raise. Nyeleti, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Lwazi. Well, currently it is quite uncertain what will actually happen to the white paper, considering the fact that we have had the elections and we will be moving into the 7th administration. As previously mentioned by Ngabuto, that the previous white paper, the 2017 white paper, was actually more aligned with the Pan-African movement. And that was completely scrapped. So we really don't know what will happen with this white paper. But as to what we can do, we do call upon people to actually participate in the call for submissions, if there will be one in future. But currently what we have initiated as civil society, which is championed by Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia, is a call to the president to actually scrap the whole white paper. In our opinion, it is incredibly shocking, as was mentioned by Margaret. It is a terribly written policy to begin with. It does not actually propose what it will actually do to ascertain some of the propositions, what will be the processes, and what will happen to the people who are already in South Africa, who hold certain refugee status, asylum seeker statuses. So what we would encourage people is to support that call. If you go on the different platforms, the website, you will see that letter. If you can endorse it, and also maybe make representations to Parliament, asking for this paper to be scrapped. To answer Margaret's questions with regards to what recommendations would I have for the white paper, firstly, it needs to be rewritten. It needs to be rewritten with consultations to the affected people. Firstly, consult the people and see what are the challenges that they are facing. Also see what it is that the needs that needs to be met before actually coming into a decision to completely overhaul the migration system. And as you mentioned, Lwazi, the white paper is trying to deal with the inefficiencies of the Department of Home Affairs, but it also fails to actually account as to how it will actually go about fixing the the inefficiencies and how it will actually deal with corruption. It says it wants to deal with corruption, but how exactly will it deal with that? So it is very poorly written in that aspect. And the only thing that I would say are great or are a great move from the white paper is the recommendation of having officials that are actually trained, who understand the laws, because I have had a lot of dealings with the Department of Home Affairs officials, and they do not understand the law. So if it were to move to a position where you have people who are represented there who actually have studied and understand this nuanced law, because migration law, a lot of people are not familiar with, and also the establishment of the specialized courts, because even in our existing courts in South Africa, many times I've been in the magistrate court and the presiding officer doesn't understand migration. The prosecutor doesn't understand migration. And a lot of times people are represented by legal aid, and legal aid lawyers also do not understand migration laws either. So that would be my recommendation. The employ of people who actually understand and have expertise in this particular field.
Thank you so much, Nyeleti, with those solid recommendations and unpacking further what the potential consequences of this legislation. I'd like to move on to Mabuto Mabena. We're coming to the tail end of this discussion, and we have heard about the various attempts at migration reform. We've heard the experiences of Zimbabwean migrants on the ground. We've heard how some aspects around the migration reform process have hindered the livelihoods of the people. But what would your message be concerning how South Africa is to approach migration? What are your thoughts around the current state of play? And what will be your parting shot and message to not only South Africans, but to the international community and also fellow Zimbabweans? Over to you, Comrade Mbuto.
Thanks so much. I will be repeating myself, basically, but I think there is a rethink. I agree with Comrade Baloy. There has to be a rethink on the white paper. We advocate for the scrapping of this white paper because it does not really manage migration. It is a reality that you have people of low skill that are resident in South Africa. They are economically active. There is no way that a country can stay with people that are unknown. His Excellencies pointed out with the building that collapsed in George, it was difficult to identify them because they are not documented. So it is important also for security reasons to account for who is in the country. And this cannot be done through deportation because since 1994 up to about 2010, people have been deported, and the South African government realized that the deportation was not the answer. Hence, the granting of special permits to Zimbabweans in 2010 and 2014 to Lesotho. At that time, it was going to extend to other migrants from SADC member states who are already in South Africa. So we think that there must be management. But we have always been saying that it is unfortunate, though, that migration happens one way down south. We would want a situation where migration spreads out within the SADC region. You should be having a South African who wants to reside in Lilongwe. We should not all of us be coming down to South Africa. But this, of course, is a problem that SADC at a political level must deal with. We have discussed in this platform how, particularly in Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, which continues to violate the electoral laws, rigging elections, is not being taken to task. You need people to express themselves freely in the electoral processes so that we begin to industrialize the entire SADC. This should be the focus of the SADC political leadership. But we are going to August, where the SADC summit is going to be held in Zimbabwe, and it will be business as normal. At the same time, you have thousands and thousands of young people from Zimbabwe and other neighboring states that are flocking to South Africa. So we called for the change of approach within the political leadership in SADC to say, how do you industrialize the economy so that migration cannot be one way? And it is clear that you cannot industrialize the economy with the current political leadership in Zimbabwe and then in other SADC member states, and also with pursuing a neoliberal agenda. So there needs to be a rethink in terms of rebuilding our economy so that we address the issues of migration. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you so much, Ngabuto, for also touching on some of how we need to also address the push factors and why people need to migrate. Because we also realize that people never want to leave their home. But there are also aspects that plague society, such as political instability, economic malfeasance on behalf of state actors. All these aspects push people towards moving out of their countries, which is a very critical point that we need to understand. But also, how do we now integrate our societies with the realization of the political reality? And those are some of the fundamental questions that are stemming from this discussion. I understand Margaret is still there. Margaret, do you have parting shots to this meeting? Margaret? Oh, no, it seems that
I need to
Margaret is not.
unmute myself.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, for me to just say, of course, migration, like we say, is an important issue. It will always remain to be, and I'm happy we are having this conversation to say that it's not a problem, it's the management. And I think this is where our focus should be more. How do we manage it? We will never stop people crossing the borders, because I've had stories. I've never been to Beitbridge, but I've heard that it takes, like, if you are to queue for your passport to be stamped, you might be there for hours, 18 hours, 19 hours. So people are saying, why should I stay on the queue for 19 hours? Why don't I just jump? You see, so people do not want to have their passport stamped or anything. They're just worried about these hurdles that come with the management of migration. And I think if the government, and with the support of the civil society, having these conversations and these processes are streamlined, we are headed to a better to a better future. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and for your contributions in this discussion and asking for very, very tough and very critical questions that we all need to think about. And before we move on to my colleague Fozia Davids to do the closing remarks, I'd like to remind the audience that throughout this entire process of this discussion, what we've been reminding ourselves is that the humanity of other people, especially those who have been othered, especially those residing around us. For many years, Zimbabweans and other migrants within our country as South Africa have formed the backbone of not only our economy, but also our families and also of our society. And part and parcel of having this discussion is to remind us of the values that have inculcated not only the liberation movement of our continent in Southern Africa in particular, but our human rights basis as humans and a society globally. And as this conversation is a reminder to do that, but also it's a reminder for us to consistently have our voices heard, especially when we receive legislation and policies that do not speak to the values that we all aspire to. As I move on, I would like to ask my colleague, Fozia Davids, to give us our closing remarks. Over to you, Fozia.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, and thank you, Lwazi, for excellent chairing, and thank you to all of our speakers and participants. And thank you to the ambassador, Nileti and Gabuto, and Margaret for contributions from the floor. So thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone for the important insights and contributions to this dialogue. And seeing that South Africa's migration policies form an integral part of governance initiatives, I think this is an incredibly timely conversation on how to humanize migrants who have experienced severe levels of marginalization within South Africa. And of course, xenophobia has been a negative reality and one that has existed for many years. And also, I think people have raised pertinent issues about dynamics at the Department of Home Affairs that also impact the lived realities of migrants in South Africa. And so also how migrants have been treated in South Africa, and I also think that we can see it in our political discourse as well. And so thank you for raising very pertinent points about migration in the country, and then also strategies to promote practical inclusivity. So thank you to all of our participants, and I'd like to thank our development partner, the Norwegian Embassy, for making this dialogue possible. So thank you to all of you for your contributions as well.
Thank you, Fawzia. Until we see each other next week or the following week, cheers. Bye-bye.